David is a walking study in political leadership, both the do's and the don'ts. He is an amazingly human character that God said, I love because he's a man after my own heart. But there is a key that we can learn from David. It's so gracious that the Bible did not cover up his warts and mistakes. It puts it all out for us to see, so we can see what David did and we can see God's reaction. And here's the pattern that I think we can walk away with that can really affect your life. It's that when David was fighting God's fights, God fought David's fights. But when David fought his own fights, he paid a terrible price. Let me show you what I mean. In most cases, in almost every case, when we see David killing Goliath, when we see David delivering people from opposing armies, he does something very special. He goes and he puts on the ephod. This was a plate that the priest wore on their chest when they were seeking God. David put this ephod on and he said, Father, what battles are you going to hand into my hands? He was getting the victory before he even went to war. He said, which battles do you want me to fight for you? He wasn't fighting for David's riches. He wasn't fighting for David's gain. He was fighting for God. He was fighting God's battles. And at the same time, what God did was said, okay, son, you go into these. I'll stand guard over you. I'll make sure that you have provisions and protection. And God went before him, and he had the victory for those battles before he ever showed up at the battlefield. Now, you flash forward a little bit, and you've got a couple of instances. One where David is counting his people, where he's taking a prideful action and he says, I've got so many people amassed under me. I've done such a good job. I'd like to fight the battle for my own pride. I'd like to step out and win a victory for David. I'd like to step out and say, David is the guy with all the stuff. So he counts his people and he counts his army and he counts his resources, and God says, that was prideful, son, you shouldn't have done that, and David is severely punished. In a second chance, when he's not in battle where he should have been, where he always was before, we know the story, he commits adultery with Bathsheba, and then he takes that, instead of going to God and saying, God, I blew it. I cannot believe I've not been in war where I was supposed to be. I've blown it and I'm sorry. That's not what he did. He decided to take matters into his own hand and fight a battle for David, and he sent Uriah to the front lines, a place that he knew was likely to be killed. And we know the rest of the story. David paid an extraordinary price for that. So what we see from this beautiful context with David is that when we fight God's fights, when our minds are on him, when we're saying, Father, what fights do you want me in and which ones do you want me to skip, then God stands over us. He opens heaven above us and he blesses us. But when we take it into our own hands to gain to ourselves, when we're being greedy with our leadership, when it becomes about us rather than about God, then we're on dangerous, dangerous ground, and leaders are liable to fall.